And we're live.
All right. So here we are. Hey, everybody. We just opened up the broadcast here on our Zoom webinar, and we're seeing the attendees file in. So welcome to our session here on how to stay productive and stay connected when working from home. Yes, very nice. We're seeing a bunch of people, including Eric. Hi, Eric. Nice to see you. Rhonda is here. So before we get going, the few housekeeping topics that I wanted to just bring up. There is a chat functionality that you'll probably be able to find. Most of you probably have used Zoom before. It's in the bottom. Do me a favor and just type in where you're dialing in from, if you're in what city or what country, and just type it into the chat window so that we can see that you guys can communicate with us. And that is also the absolutely best place to ask questions. So if questions come up, we will have plenty of time at the end to answer a few of the questions that you guys might have. All right, so Rhonda is dialing in from Santa Clara. Hi, Rhonda. Thank you.
Hey, Patrick, maybe you can ask somebody who's the furthest away from San Francisco.
The furthest away, exactly. Who will win that prize? Well, Redwood City with Chris won't do it. But Baltimore, very nice. Hey, Wade, good to see you again.
You gotta beat Baltimore.
We have Vilnius from Lithuania. Now that probably will take the prize with Agni. Awesome, love that. All right, cool. Yes, attendees are all
I hear you're huge in the former Eastern Bloc countries.
Absolutely, they all know me there. What?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Anything else? So sometimes I might ask you guys to raise your hand. You can see the raise your hand functionality right next to the chat on the bottom. And with that, I think we should just get the show on the road. Ali, what do you think?
That's great. Hi, everybody. My name is Ali Benham. I'm with Riviera Partners. Thanks for joining us. I am here in San Francisco today and happy to be with Patrick Ewers. He's the founder and CEO of Mind Maven. I've known Patrick for over 10 years now, and he's been a coach for us, and he's always had a pragmatic view in terms of how to approach various challenges. And he was very instrumental in our business in the early days in helping us develop a framework for effective relationships. So I've always found his advice to be quite timely and pragmatic. A quick summary on Patrick. He's, as I said, founder and CEO of Mind Maven. They empower execs to reach their full potential as leaders. He's worked with companies such as Reddit, Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, First Round Capital, and then, of course, us. And today he is going to spend some time and tell us how to be more effective when we work from home. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Ali. Hey, it's awesome to be here. And some of you might have asked yourself, hey, should I go to this? I've been 4 weeks working from home. I kind of got this, right? And what I really want to set the expectations here is this content isn't just going to be a few tips thrown together. It is hopefully going to be something that's really, really well put together and sort of gives you a plan to deal with some of the challenges we're facing when working from home. And some of you guys will notice that it's actually getting harder and more challenging because the excitement of the first few weeks are over. But we also still probably have another 4 weeks to go before there's even a thinking of going back to whatever our new normal is. And so I hope what I'm presenting to you guys today is exactly a solution to that, some answers, some really interesting ideas to almost like put a platform in place, a framework of how to think about working from home. And so before I get started, let me talk to you guys a little bit more about us at Mind Maven. So I'm Patrick Ewers, the CEO and founder of Mind Maven, as Ali mentioned, and we are an executive coaching firm. That's basically what we are. And what makes us somewhat unique is that we're focusing on helping leaders achieve their best, their fullest potential, if you will, by focusing on one thing, and that is relationships. And the reason we're focusing on relationships is because it's pretty easy to declare that nobody that you know that ever reached the fullest potential, be it your favorite athlete or be it an amazing leader that you adore, none of these people have ever achieved that level of success without help from others. And it's something that we often underestimate. And so over the years, our clients basically kept on telling us that we gave them superpowers. And so eventually we're like, well, maybe that's what we do. So we're in the business of unleashing superpowers, and we have 3 of those. One is leverage, and it's basically the art of how to work with a chief of staff or an EA in a much more efficient way by delegating a lot more to them in smarter ways. And we've been consistently being able to save a leader 8 to 10 hours a week of work. The next superpower is intent, and it's basically focusing on intentful use of time allocation. It's something that we're often horrible about, and the more we get stressed, and right now we are in stressful times, the more reactive we get. So it's about staying more proactive and focusing on those things that move the needle most. And then last but not least, the thing that is closest to my heart, of course, is the superpower of fellowship, of being able to generate a fellowship of people that want to join your vision, but also follow you, preferably through hell and back, which many of us in the startup world have to basically do to succeed. But it's not just people on your team, it's also people within your network, getting these people to think of you at the right time so that they give you access to those breakthrough opportunities that can basically make or break your business. So you might be asking, right, okay, this is all nice, but why is MindMaven so good at teaching working from home? Well, the answer is surprisingly easy. We have been running MindMaven for over a decade, 100% remote. We've taught many other people how to do it, not necessarily because it's our core business, but because people came and asked us, how do you do this? And then, of course, the second part, a big part about being successful working from home is staying connected and being proactive about it. And that's all that we do. That's our bread and butter. That is what we teach. So what I hope you will experience in today's session is that you'll have quite a few tips and tricks and pragmatic tools that you're going to work away from this. And so the first place we should start is like, what challenges are we facing when we're working from home? And I think some of you might be experiencing it right now, and that is that it becomes harder and harder to actually stay completely happy, to feel good about how we are living our lives when we're working from home. And to stay happy, there are 2 factors that really matter in my book. Number 1 is that you need to continue to stay connected. The second one is feeling productive. Why? Why do I think those 2 things are very important? Well, let's walk through the normal cases. One of the things you might have noticed is that we're switching a lot in terms of what we're doing when we're working from home. Like we're doing a little bit of work, then we're doing a little bit of home stuff, and so on and so forth. And what that means is that basically the pressure increases, feelings of guilt come up, and we end up having to work longer hours to get the productivity down that we need to do our job well. And so while you used to be able to get everything done in 8 to 9 hours, you might now need 10 to 12, if not 14 hours. And people will start resenting working from home because of that. And so the interesting thing, though, is if I were to stand right next to you with a stopwatch, there's a good chance that if I stop the time you're actually working, it's still just 9 hours a day or something. It's not that dramatically more, but it feels a lot more. And the same thing is true with, and that can lead to quite a bit of feelings of unhappiness, because you feel like all I'm doing now is working and don't have my personal life anymore. Feeling connected is just as important. We are, as humans, animals that thrive on being connected. And we used to have that ad hoc when we went to the office. These lovely conversations that happened are maybe not taking place as much. And so we have to learn to be more proactive about it. And when we're not connected, we're going to start feeling lonely, or even in some cases, varying degrees of severity around depressions can creep up on you. And so the point I'm making here is really easy to fail at both. It's easy to fail at being connected as well as being productive. And both of those, the pressure and the isolation, can lead to the key saboteur of being successful working from home. That is that you will have an unhappiness. And so what I want to do today is just talk about the tools that we have to basically make sure that those things don't happen, and that you can basically stay happy while working from home, because there are lots of really powerful, really nice benefits that you can get from working from home. So let's get started with the conversation around how to stay connected and how to do that well. And the first place I want to start is actually how to optimize your meetings, how to basically in a virtual world connect with people through the business opportunities that we have. So let's jump in. The first thing we have to ask ourselves is how do we communicate? Because when we communicate, we feel connected, right? And there are basically 3 channels that we need to be aware of. This is super common sense stuff, but there's some very powerful learnings to be had here. Number 1 is, right, the words that we choose, the content of my words. Number 2 is the tone of my voice. What am I saying and how does it sound? And then third, visual expressions, my body language, but specifically everything that you see right now, for example, in my face. Now, this stuff isn't stuff that I came up with. It's actually from a professor of psychology at UCLA, Albert Merbrine, who basically dissected these 3 channels of communication and try to understand how are we processing that when we are processing them. So for example, right now, all of you guys here, you see me, you can hear me in terms of my voice, and you can hear my content, my words. So you're processing me at 100%. What Albert tried to figure out is how important are these channels relative to each other. And what he found out is actually kind of surprising. And what is most surprising is that basically the choice of your words, the content, represents only 7% of what you're processing when you are having 100% of communication channel abilities to me. 38% is voice, the tone, and 55% is basically the body language that we have. And the reason I'm bringing this up right now is just to make it clear, this is why we're craving meeting with people in person, because when we do, things go better. We all have been in that situation where we send an email that we thought was pretty innocent, right? And then we shipped it out and got a flare mail back. Something blew up completely in our face. And we're like, what the hell happened here? Well, what happened is that basically we communicated only at 7%, and the person who was maybe in a more emotional state filled the remaining 93% in by however he felt and misunderstood things. And when we meet in person, this happens a lot less. And so that leads me to the very first tip. And this is an obvious now, many of you guys probably have gotten to it, but basically default to video, right? Make it a rule. All the meetings you are having, have them with video on. Let people use virtual backgrounds if they have to, but basically make sure that when you're communicating, working from home, that you are getting as close as possible to the physical experience by firing on all 3 channels. Right? And that is exactly why we need to be doing this. We want the words, the tone, the body language to be there so that we get very close to an in-person meeting. The other benefit you're going to get from this is, of course, the video will reduce the lure of trying to do multitasking quite dramatically. It actually can stop it in its tracks. And the reason I believe that is important is because multitasking doesn't exist. The only thing that people are good at is rapid switching. And whenever you switch, there are switching costs. So my second tip around staying connected is basically try to recapture as much as you can the in-person experience. And one thing that you've noticed is that I'm looking at you right now, right? But most of you guys have the camera of your computer above the screen. And so the image of the person you're looking at is below it. So it would be as if I'd be talking to you guys right now like this. Have you guys seen the difference? So this is basically as if I'm looking at the chest area of that person. It feels a lot less connecting. Now I'm looking back up again to into your eyes, into the camera, and because of that, it feels a lot more connecting. So let me give you a quick picture of the setup I have from where I'm right now talking to you guys. You just basically, this is what I get to see. I have a camera that is on a tripod, and behind it, I put the image of the people that I'm talking to. And so when I deliver Zoom meetings, I basically look slightly past that camera onto the image, but it delivers a bit more of a connective kind of experience. The other big advice that I have is invest into a nice microphone if you have it. Like you can see right now, here is my microphone. I'm like bringing it down. And the closer I get to that microphone, the better you hear is the quality of my audio. Obviously, you don't have to go that crazy, but the tip that I do have for you is test out the different microphones you have. You have headsets, you have microphones in your computer, and one of them is going to be better than the other. All right, so let's move on to the third tip that I have, and that is basically try to make sure that when you work, that you create these, recreate in some way or the other, in a way that's comfortable to you, these ad hoc conversations that take place. We like calling them water cooler chats. And I got 5 tips for you, right? Number one is just make them happen, even if you're not physically in the same office, right? By proactively scheduling water cooler conversations where you just chit chat for 10 minutes over whatever you want to talk about and make that be socially acceptable. It's going to be awkward in the beginning if you're not already doing it, but eventually you're going to get used to it. It just becomes the new normal of like, hey, do you have, can we hop on a quick water cooler chat? And people will say, yes, sure, let's do this. The next tip I have is utilize the green room method. The green room method is basically to reduce meetings from 60 minutes to 50 minutes. This is a productivity tip that is universally smart to do. But then use the first 5 minutes. Let's say the meeting would start at noon. It will now basically still start at noon, but the content of the meeting doesn't start until 5 after noon. And that gives you 5 minutes to basically socially connect with whoever you're meeting with and check in and so on and so forth. It also lets those stragglers show up, and so every meeting will start on time. And then, of course, you have 5 minutes at the end to do the same and maybe decide to take some of the topics that were discovered offline into a water cooler chat type of conversations. Now, the next tip is to eliminate small talk. In fact, there is a very good chance, so look out for that, Ali and I are going to be hosting one around if you're not supposed to do small talk, what do you replace it with? We're working on launching a deep dive into how to have more deeper and more meaningful interactions with people when working from home. So stay tuned for that. But that's basically a tip is here. Find ways to ask deeper, more meaningful questions instead of talking about how the weather has been lately. And through that process, you will feel a lot more connected with people. Finally, the happy hour. I'm sure many of you guys have done them already. They're really good. Put them up, let them happen. And then the most creative, unique thing that you can do is create a Zoom room that is basically always open, always there, and people can drop into as if it's a virtual break room. So whenever you're taking a coffee break, just open up that Zoom room and see if somebody's in there. You know, what will happen is that sometimes you might not have somebody there, but eventually people will pop in, and you will find the times that people are most often in the break room, and people will actually congregate, start roughly around the same time in that room as we go. So one of the questions you're probably asking is, why is Patrick so keen on making sure that relationships, that we're staying connected? And the answer to that is because we often underestimate the power of relationships and what they can mean for us. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because it's not surprising a lot of scientists have tried to understand this. And the longest running study around this was one made by Harvard, started in 1939. And the purpose of that study was to find the key to long-term happiness and fulfillment. That's what they wanted to find out. And unsurprisingly, what they found out in terms of the result of that study is that the most powerful aspect of driving our personal happiness and health is having good relationships with people. Or in other words, the quality of our life is directly proportional to the quality of our relationships. And when I'm talking about life, I'm really talking about everything. I'm talking about the emotional, the physical, and the mental state of our life, right? So we cannot underestimate how important relationships are. And typically they happen because we went to a physical environment. Now they happen a lot less. And so we have to become very proactive about this. And here's the problem about this, or why it isn't that easy. Because there's another thing about the human condition that is very fundamental, and that is when we are under threat, when we are embarrassed, when we feel stressed, one of the natural reactions we have is that we react very instinctively and we retreat into a protective position. We climb back into our shell or into our cave and hide away. And what we do is we sever the connections to those people that we actually in those moments need the most. There's another study that Harvard done. And, and before I get to that, and that connection, that severing of connection can then lead to massive amounts of unhappiness. Something that we have to be very, very acutely aware of as we're entering a national, working from home at a national level. But it's not just about unhappiness. It also has to do a lot with performance, right? So Harvard did a study where they had two groups of students. One student was that type of student that, like, I got into Harvard, I'm going to study. I'm going to just study because that's all I have to do. I want to get great grades. And then there was this other group of students that also studied, but they had a decent, healthy amount of social connection. And time again, that second group, the one with social connections, outperformed the hardcore study group. So it actually also helps with performance. And so my concern about all of that is that we're actually entering in an epidemic of isolation by doing all of this social distancing. I'm a huge believer, please stay home, and stay 6 feet away from people. It is what we need to do now, but we often misunderstand the definition of social distancing, because the most important word in social distancing is the word social. We need to stay wildly social when practicing social distancing. And so that's what I want to get into, with a few more pragmatic tips around how we can put that word social back into social distancing. And of course, the most logical answer is that we need to simply to feel connected. We need to interact with people, and so therefore what we have to be good at is connecting more with people, interacting more with people. And so the most pragmatic tip is to figure out how do we best connect with people. The advice that I have here is again, go from high bandwidth communications, all three channels if we can, video calls, or even things like video mails, like this tool Loom that you could use. I've also heard about Marco Polo as a tool that people could use, where you can just send a link to a quick video where you're talking to people about whatever you want to talk to them about, but they get to have you at 100% of the communication channels, not just the text. Right? If you can't do that, phone calls are great. You still have the voice. People can still understand that whatever you're saying is meant to be, negative. And if you can't do that, email and text is great too. At the end of the day, it's all about making it easy, making it natural, and most importantly, and I can't stress this enough, make it happen. We just got to make sure it happens. And so I'd rather have you send a lot of text than nothing at all, right? So the next question we'll have to ask ourselves is, okay, so if I want to reach out to people more, I have to ask ourselves, to who do I reach out to? And the obvious answer that you will come to when you are looking at this is those people that through the recency bias, those people that you have the stronger connections with, right? I'm talking about your close friends. I'm talking about your extended family, possibly mentors that you work with, or spiritual groups that you belong to, and work with. Volunteering is a good place of people to find. And then of course, those people that you currently are working with. And it's very good to do that, because when you reach out to these people, there is a very strong relationship already in place, and touching with these people will compound the experience of feeling connected. But the point that I'm trying to make is, don't stop there, because we have a lot of people in our network that we haven't touched in a while. They are often called the weak ties, and they are often exceptionally powerful, because they give us a lot more opportunities than others. Why? Because we have a lot less overlap, right? In terms of what we know in common and what we have in common. And so the experiences with those people can be a lot more intriguing, for example. So what I'm saying is, reach out to people you haven't talked to in over a year. These could be college buddies, these could be older roommates, these could be prior co-workers. Check in with them right now and see how it is. And keep in mind, this really big thing is, when you are reaching out, you're doing it to help yourself feel more connected, but you're also doing it for that person you're reaching out to. He or she will ultimately also feel a lot more connected. All right, so that was all about like one-on-one interactions and how we can deal with those. Now we can basically switch over and say, well, can we also do group experiences when working working from home? And the answer is, of course, yeah. The most people, however, make the mistakes. They're trying to take what is existence in the virtual world, in the real world, into the virtual world. And the better approach is to see, hey, what can we do in the virtual world that is particularly easy to do there, and not just try to translate what we've done into the new environment that we're finding ourselves in. And there's a spectrum of things you can do, from a very casual coffee talk type of thing where you get a group of people, non-recurring, and you invite different people each time, very ad hoc together, all the way to what I call virtual mastermind meetings, where you actually engage in some recreational education. You know, one of the best ways you can make yourself feel happy is by making yourself feel like you're growing, you know, in whatever way. And so these meetings can be great. They're, you know, smaller groups of always the same people that want to talk about the same topic, and you have preferably the same time every week to do so. But don't stop there. You can get super creative with things. You know, like obviously you can, you know, do bar hopping, have a cocktail evening where everybody like mixes a cocktail. You can, if you are a book nerd like I am, you can host a book club. Super easy to do online, obviously. And my two favorite ones is play with people, just the way you would have played with them before. And board games, many of them are online. And of course, you can do binge watching together as well, you know, and then afterwards get together and have a, you know, what the fuck moment where, you know, what was this red wedding all about, type of moment together, very bonding. There's some tips that we have in terms of how you can do it. We came across Jackbox. I don't know how many of you guys have heard about it. It's a great place to play together. Settlers of Catan, I don't know if you know that guy. It's one of my favorite board games, but it's completely online, so you can play it. It's super awesome. There's House Party, which I'm sure half of you guys are already on. And there's this thing called the Netflix Party. You can only do it on a computer, but you can basically start watching a show together at the same time. It syncs it up, and you can even, you know, make comments on the side in terms of text. Could be actually really fun, worthwhile trying out. Maybe it is your cup of coffee or not. So everything I talked about right now says probably makes it feel like it's very easy and very simple to do, but why does it still feel so hard? Well, the reason is that there are three barriers that get into the way. And barrier number one is basically that you just don't know who to reach out to. And so my tip for that is build a list organically. You are probably thinking about random people at least 3 times a day, right? And as these names pop into your brain, just find a way to collect them by writing them into a Notion note, by putting them into Evernote, or even just an Excel spreadsheet. But if you do that for a few days, you're going to have more than 15 people there that you can start reaching out to. And that is as simple as it gets. The second barrier is that we are constantly fighting this classic challenge of urgency versus importance. There's no doubt that relationships are important. I think we all agree with that. But the funny thing is that everything that has to do with relationships is almost never urgent. And therefore, we push relationships away because we're busy people. And so what we need to do is find a way to give relationships so much importance, so much urgency that it actually happens. And the best tip that I have for you there is a concept called action triggers. Action triggers is the skill of developing a new habit based on an existing habit. So for example, let's say your new habit is I want to reach out to somebody that I would have not reached out that day at least once. And that's the habit you want. Well, what you can do is you can say, well, I already have this habit of wanting to get a coffee in the morning. Can I actually see a show of hands here from everybody on board here? How many people like coffee in the morning and have that habit? It could be tea, it could be something else. Like lots of you guys are already doing it. I see it. This is awesome. But this is the point is, so before you go get your coffee, you don't, you will think of, oh, it's time for my coffee. It's almost an automatism. It's a habit. As you're thinking coffee is thinking reach out, right? And then you reach out before you get your coffee, and then you reward yourself with the habit of that coffee. And if you do that for 21 days or longer, you will end up probably establishing this outreach habit quite naturally and quite fast. All right. The barrier number 3 that gets in the way is that you don't know what to say. You don't know what to send to people. And there, we're getting really into the speciality of what Mind Maven is known for, and that is how to deliver experiences that are being perceived as meaningful, relevant, and valuable. And one thing that we came out with is this concept called freebies. We have five 5 freebies. And the beautiful thing about these freebies is that you can do them at any point in time with anybody that you know, as long as you have a decent enough relationship with them. And I'm going to throw one of the 5 freebies at you just so that you have something to work with. But if I had the time, I could pick, for example, Sam here. Sam Parker is with us, and I could ask him about some name, and I would be able to basically guaranteed find an email that he would feel comfortable sending him to it using the 5 freebies. One of them is saying thank you. We don't say thank you enough in our world, and it's always a very good experience to receive a genuinely heartfelt thank you. The reason why, because we're waiting for those moments to pop up where we can say thank you, and we only do it in terms of how social convention tells us to do it right after. But I bet you can come up with a name right now that you haven't talked to in a year, with somebody with whom you have a decent relationship. And if you just ask in your brain, it's like, what am I grateful for in terms of this person? You'll come up with something, and it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be life altering. It could be that he watched your dog for a weekend or something. And that is enough for you to reach out to that person and say, hey, you know what, just thinking about you and how much I always appreciated that you took my dog that weekend, just to give you a very simple example. Now, let's move on to the last thing I wanted to give you about staying connected. And the reason I left this to last is because it's the most powerful thing my Maven ever has come up with. It's a concept called positive alacrity. And it's the idea of delivering micro experiences to people that these people perceive as highly, exceptionally uplifting. The habit behind this is a very simple one. It is when you think something positive and you genuinely believe it, voice it. That's as simple as it is, right? So, you know, one of the things we still should be doing is moving our bodies. So maybe we walk around the block and you might come across somebody who's passing your way, of course, 6 feet or more apart, but you notice that he or she has really interesting glasses on and they fit to the face. It's thoughts that we have day to day, right? These types of positive thoughts pop in our head at least 5 times a day, but we don't do anything with them. So as you see that happening, as you recognize that, basically as you pass the person, you say, oh, those are nice glasses. They suit you. As you walk on, the person, you know, by the time the person actually is processing that information, you're 10, 12 feet away, and all that he or she can do is smile and let it sit in. And you just made that person's day for completely free. It didn't take you much more effort. It's utilizing something that you already do on a day-to-day basis. And the only thing you're changing is you have to learn how to voice it and voice it fast. All right, so I'm going to switch over now and talk a little bit more about how can we stay productive. Just a reminder of you guys, I haven't seen any questions pop here. So if you have questions for me, please ask them. Put them in the chat room, and at the end, Ali will help ask some of those questions to me. All right, so throw in some questions here, guys. It's part of what we want to do here. Okay, good. So staying productive. The first thing we can do is obviously make sure that your setup at home is really important. And the reason why is because we have to realize a few things, right? We are now working from home. And that means that, and home is a place where we do a bunch of really interesting things that we really enjoy. We like to socialize at home. We like to relax. We like to recuperate, right? And because of that, it's full of triggers that are actually subconsciously triggering or driving those behaviors, those things we do at home. And so when you start working from home and you're not used to it, you know, the odds are really against you. It's really challenging to basically make that work. So what are some of the things we can do to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success? And the best place to do is start talking about your setup at home, the physical environment in which you are practicing the work from home situation. So we're going to send you a long email with a lot of links, with a lot of advice, extra advice in it. And one of them is actually the link to these slides. I'm sure that you guys have questions. And in these slides, there are 35 slides more in it than what I'm able to show today. And for example, we're going way more into detail around the setup on those slides. But what I want you to do is make sure that you have a dedicated place where you're working when you're working from home. Preferably a room where you can close the door, but many of us can't have that luxury. And if that's the case, then just have a desk somewhere. And if you can't have a desk, then basically take your kitchen table and set up the dedicated workspace every day and then clean it off afterwards every day. That's basically the idea here. And next thing you need to be aware of is to make sure that you have ergonomics, right? When we're working from home, we're already moving our body less. So one of the best things we can do is have a standing desk ability. So either one that can sit and stand. If you have the abilities to get such a desk, I would highly recommend doing that. If you cannot, then take one of those tabletop things that you can, like tabletop risers. If you can't do that, get a bunch of books or reams of paper and put your secondary display on it. And yes, I recommend having a secondary display to not work on a laptop like this, because eventually it's going to get you. And if you've been doing this for 2 weeks, you're probably already noticing the negative impacts of doing so. And if you can't have a secondary display because that's not available to you, then put the laptop on those books and use an external mouse and an external keyboard. I would recommend using a mouse like this. It's a vertical mouse, and the benefit of it is that your hands are more like this instead of this, and it's just going to help you stay healthier longer working from home. Last but not least, light is really important. I like having 2 types of lights. You can see right now here, I'm shining these architectural drafting lights onto me at a sunlight type of rating, 6,400 Kelvin, and it's very nice for me to stay bright and light and awake. But sometimes I want to do thinking time, and then I turn on lights that are a bit more warm and more incandescent from the feeling. All right. So let's get to the most important part about being successful working from home, being productive working from home. And there's, you have to find your rhythm. This is particularly important for people that have kids at home and have to spread with that. And what I mean with finding your rhythm is that you need to understand what your modes are when you're working from home. You need to understand you need to learn how to become aware when you're transitioning from one mode to the other. And third, you need to find structure into your day that allows you to stay productive. So let me talk you guys through this real quick as we go through this. The modes are absolutely critical to being productive at home and understanding that. And the reason being is that we've been forced to invite a version of us that is usually only exists in the workplace into our home. And so now there's a version of you that is the person that works and a version that is at home, and there are all sorts of sub modes to that. You can be at home a parent, you can be a person who's reading, a person who's resting, a person who's working out, and so on and so forth. All of those things. So basically you have 2 modes here. You have the work me mode versus the home me mode. And being aware of that mode is exceptionally important, because most of us don't actually realize how we're switching between those 2 modes. And the problem is that we are constantly switching between those modes when we're working from home because of all of those things that we talked about already in terms of the triggers existing. So one very important aspect of being successful working from home is having an awareness of what mode you're in. And so what I want to talk to you guys about is, how do we generate that awareness? How do we make that happen? And the answer is simpler than you think. Number one is we just have to anchor around the moments where we're switching. The more we understand that we're switching, we can actually choose to take action. And so how do we do that? Well, number one is and I got a bunch of tips here for you guys, but the most powerful one is boost your awareness of the fact that you're transitioning from the work me to the home me, or vice versa. You know, when you do that, you will maybe notice that you're actually switching quite a bit, and often in like micro moments. And the thing you have to realize is, with every switch, you are introducing switching costs to your day, which are then subsequently reducing your productivity, which then subsequently causes you like you need to work, the feeling like you need to work more. And all of a sudden you think all you're doing is working when you're working from home. So the best way to do that is to basically develop some attention to things that happen just around the moment you're transitioning or entering into such a transition. So one thing that you could do is you can look out for those triggers. What are the triggers around you here that make you think of switching into the home world, right? It could be that you're working in the kitchen and every time you see the fridge, you want to go up and get something from the fridge. Or, Ali is particularly challenged here because he has the bar behind him. And if he just turns around, he sees probably a really nice scotch. That'll get me into home mode really fast. So be aware of those triggers and name them, give them a name, because then you can say, oh, that's this trigger firing. And in the moment you have that awareness that there's a trigger firing and that is possibly entering you into a transition period of work me to home me, you have an ability to make a choice of, for example, saying, you know what, no, I really like that scotch right now, but I'm not going to go for it. I'm going to finish this particular piece of work for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to allow myself a 10 or 15-minute break. Another good sign is physical movement. Every time you move, there's a good chance you might be switching from work me to home me or vice versa. And of course, emotions and feelings. For example, procrastination is a really big one that settles in after we're getting used to working from home. Okay, so besides that, there are some other techniques that I wanted to offer you up. One is the portal technique, right? When you're transitioning, you probably are going through some form of portal, physically speaking. That could be as simple as the door into your office or the door into your, the bedroom out of which you happen to work. That's great. If you have that, then that's your portal, but many of us don't have it. So if you're working off the kitchen table, you can take an edge of it. You can take a virtual line, an extension of the table, and basically until it hits the wall. And whenever you cross through that line of the extension of the table, you are going through your portal. And that allows you to be aware of, oh, I'm switching from home me into work me. And it creates that awareness around that process taking place. All right. Finally, the most powerful technique around being aware of that transition is to basically orchestrate to basically create that transition by creating what we call morning routines, where you're moving from the home me into the work me, and doing that very, very much in a proactive and in a designed way, in a best practice way. And this is part of what we train all of our clients and what we coach all of our clients. And it's one of the best productivity enhancing things you can do. And so what you do is you create a checklist that is a morning routine that you run every morning. For example, this is mine. I first make sure that my computer is set up in the way I like it. I close all that crap that I don't need to have open. I look at my calendar to see how much makers time I have today. I then go through my task management tool and clean it up a little, and then decide what tasks do I want to promote to today? What are my priorities today? And only then, when I'm done with all of that, am I allowed to go and check email. Because email is a thing that makes us become reactive, and we know that the most proactive people are the most successful people we know. So we want to stay proactive, specifically when we're working from home, because it's one of the best ways to stay productive. And that really leads me to how to structure your day. Already the meeting debrief was a little bit of a touch on that. But structuring the day is exceptionally important because it really allows you to stay productive by thinking of your day in blocks of times where you are in one mode or the other, and you take control over how you use your time. And so I want to start with the most powerful productivity principle that I have come across in my career. It resembled in every single productivity module or framework that you'll ever read. From Getting Things Done by David Allen to Franklin Covey, they all have it built in. They just built more fancy stuff around it. But at the end of the day, it is a very simple principle. And it is, as long as you always know what you need to work on next, and that next thing is the most important thing to work on next. If you do that, and you do that disciplinedly, consistently over long periods of time, it is undoubtedly that you're going to become a lot more productive, a more productive version of yourself. And that's particularly important when you are working from home. So pragmatically speaking, how do we do that? Well, you need to have a task management system. We're huge fans of Asana. And the reason being is because Asana has this really smart My Task section, and in it, it has today's and upcoming and later. And for example, what I do is I design my today into an on deck and an up next. And that's where I'm putting the tasks in that I want to work on today. And what is so powerful about it is, you see, I only have about 5 tasks in this example. That's all I have to do today. I know that my list of tasks is like 100 tasks long, but I don't have to see it. It doesn't have that impact on me of not, of feeling like I never can win, because I can get to task box 0, if you will, by just making sure I get all of these things done today. If I don't think I can get them all done, I will demote 1 or 2 of these tasks down to upcoming. Now, having that in place is going to be really helpful, but you will still have a huge enemy lurking around in all of the corners of your home. And that enemy is called procrastination, right? It's something that we all have to deal with. Some of us are really good at it in terms of avoiding it. Others are horrible. And I had to work years on myself to basically find a way to overcome procrastination. And so the trick about procrastination is to not let it take any power over you by staying very strictly disciplined around those priorities that you decided to work on. And so that's easy for me to say, right? Like, just to stay disciplined. So here's a tip of a checklist that you can run whenever a thought comes up about something else you can do, right? So one of the best tips I have is, if you want to do something else that is really just procrastination, add it to the top of your to-do list, because it puts in front of you now a comparison of all the tasks you picked that you think are important and move the needle most to this procrastination task. And you have to basically really, put it up there and do it above all of them. And that gives you enough time to actually reconsider if that's a good idea. If that doesn't work, what you can do is you can just start like, okay, that's a great idea. Can I discard it until later and get back to work? Yes. Great. That'll help you. If that doesn't work, define that task. What exactly do you want to do here? What is that task? Very specifically in 1 sentence. Then ask yourself, is it urgent and important? If no, you stop, right? If yes, you basically say, put it up to your next, put it up on top of your task. Then you ask yourself, well, I put it up on top of my tasks, but am I self-sabotaging myself? If yes, well, I have to, I should remove it again or move it below, right? And then do a double ask on and say, well, am I really 100% sure I'm not self-sabotaging myself? And I think if you run this checklist, there's a pretty good chance that by the end of it, any kind of procrastination that might happen in terms of you wanting to do something else that distracts you, you have a pretty good chance of containing it. And sometimes we're just not strong enough to deal with it, and then you just let it run. And that's got to be okay too, because we're living in very unique times. All right. This is one of my favorite tips that I'll have for you, and that is basically match your energy levels to the type of work you're doing. We all go through the day at various levels of ability, of creative power, basically, right? There are people that start the day later, and then there are these early birds. Most of us are early birds, which means about an hour after waking up, we reach our highest peak. And so what you want to do is you want to match the work you do to that type of abilities. So do your creative work, do your thinking work, do white space time. It's a module that we teach our clients on how to stay proactive. And then after that time, you will drop pretty deep, because your ability to concentrate goes down. We're going to have lunch. We have to digest that lunch, and so that's a great time to do meetings where you can be in the mode of a manager, and then do manager's time. And then there's a second wind that comes usually in the afternoon, and some of us even have a third one later at night. So match the type of things you want to do towards your energy levels. It can actually has a profound impact on the work you're doing, the productivity you have. The next tip that I have for you is the Pomodoro technique. I'm sure many of you guys, can I see how many of you guys have heard about that? Show of hands here. For example, Bina, do you know of it? Very curious. Okay, many of you have heard of it. It's super simple, but I'm a big fan of simple things because they're the easiest to adopt and actually make stick. Pomodoro technique is set a timer, can be on your phone, can be anywhere, for 25 minutes. Try to come up with a task that you can actually kind of complete in those 25 minutes. And then allow yourself a 5-minute break. And then you do that over and over again throughout the day. And if you do that with the combination of focusing on those things that matter most, you'll probably become quite productive. By the way, it doesn't have to be 25 minutes in my world. Find your own rhythm. It could be 90 minutes with 15 minutes of a break. It could be 50 minutes and a 10-minute break if you want to be on the 1-hour cycle to fit it well in with meetings. It doesn't really matter, but it's a very powerful way to do with this. Last but not least, I have some advice around you that I think is very, very, very important and often underestimated. And that is that you have to prioritize movement. Why? Because we're moving a lot less when we're working from home. Because we don't have to go to a conference room, we don't have to commute to work. It's all of those things. And so there are 3 things you can do. Again, in the slide deck that we're actually sending out to you guys, lots more information there. But do micro stretching, right? Like stretch your body between meetings or between Pomodoro sessions, right? We had these 5 minutes of a break. Use those 5 minutes to do all sorts of stretching. Utilize that when working from home, because there are a bunch of things you can do at home that you cannot do at work. Walk around the block. Obviously, I recommend doing it 3 times if you can, and work out remotely as best as you can. I'm a huge fan of the stuff that people are putting up on YouTube. It works really well. It's often very well done. If that's not your cake, find some of those apps on the App Store that do a really good job of letting you customize your workout. And finally, actually meet up with people online and do a workout. I had the benefit of working with a remote remote personal trainer for over 2 years, and it works exceptionally well. He probably helped me become the fittest ever since I turned a dad. And the funniest thing about him is that this guy lives in Spain. So really no problem to do it. Good. So the last tip that I'll have for you guys here around staying productive is really create boundaries around the work me mode, right? So the problem again is that you're living at home. People around you don't understand that you have the work me mode and the home me mode. And so they might approach you just like you are at home when you are indeed in the work me mode. So educate people about this, specifically kids, and then set up some rules, specifically physical. The reason why you want to do that is because every time you get an interruption, it's really expensive it costs a lot towards your productivity. You can see this on this graph. Everything that's green shaded is time lost, because it takes a little time for us to start working, get concentrated to the point where we're doing a good job. But every interruption brings us down to 0 instantly in a second. And so rules, what can you close the door? When the door is closed, for example, do not disturb. I'm in work me mode. And if you don't have an office where you can work out and people have to walk around, no problem, then set up a little red flag that says I'm in work me mode. If you don't have that, you can use things like this. For example, if this is on, I'm in work me mode. Only disturb me if the house is on fire or something like this. All right, guys. Ali, I think you can come back now and switch on, because I have only a few more things for you guys to share, and then we can start asking questions. So you guys throw in some questions if you have it. What I wanted to end off is with two important comments. These times are still stressful. They are still going on. And will for a while, but the thing that I use for myself to get over this is basically I remind myself that this shall pass, and most importantly is I remind myself that there are things we have control over and there are things that we do not have control over, and the things we do have control over are the things that I try to focus on. And I hope that today I gave you a lot of really good tips and tricks on how you can control your experience working from home. You have a lot more control over it than you think. And the last bit before we open up for questions is this while it's kind of sucky that we have to stay inside and cabin fever is starting, there's a lot of benefits you can get from working from home, and remind yourself of it. I have to do that almost daily just so that I don't go completely crazy. But I have the world's shortest commute. It's about 10 seconds. My water cooler conversations are with my kids, and I have way more meaningful interactions since I started working from home. You could do things at home that you can't do in the office, and you can have the things you like around you, and you can meet with people that you usually wouldn't meet because they're physically too far away. All right, guys, that's what I'm going to leave it off with. feel free to ask questions in the chat. And Ali, I'm going to let you hit away with some of the questions that we might have fielded.
Okay, Patrick, I just wanted to say one thing regarding drinking while under quarantine. I basically heard airport rules are applied while we're under quarantine, which means you can drink at any time. So
All right, very good.
anyway, first question. Do you have any tips around staying focused and productive while the kids are at home? Is it okay to throw things at them when they come into my office?
Yes, of course. No, so this is a very, very good question. We get it quite regularly. And for those that have kids at home and they have to straddle this work stuff with the teaching stuff, with the being at home, just more important than ever, be aware of those modes and be really good at structuring your day. I would, like if the two parents at home, for example, switch on and off, start working maybe a little earlier. So, like start working at 7, from 7 to 9 you get some work in, from 9 to 11 or noon you do homeschooling, then you get to go back to work while your partner might take over, and so on and so forth. But I think then the other thing, I think that some people feel like they have to maintain a somewhat professional appearance when working from home, and they get very stressed out when kids are loud in the background, or even kids jump in to come in and ask you questions. It's very important to basically make that a rule, hopefully nationally, where like kids are welcome, and it is normal to hear kids or people in the background. We don't need to appear that professional anymore, at least at this point in time. And the best tip that I have there is, if a kid does come and disturb you, the rule is you introduce the kid to whoever you're talking with. I can guarantee you do that 2 or 3 times, and the kid will not come in anymore when they see you on Zoom or something.
Got it.
All right.
Okay. Here's another question from Peoria. What can I do as a manager to keep my team more productive while working from home?
So first and foremost, I think check in with them, and check in with them really regularly, and not just on the professional side of things, but on personal side of things. Make sure there are not things that they need that they're lacking. Make sure there are not anxieties that are going unchecked. Make sure that that they aren't living in some form of fear that can actually really profoundly impact their productivity. Then slowly move into understanding what their struggles are with, the struggles with working from home. It's one of those things that if there is a struggle, it's one of those things we just discovered in today's session. And then basically give them advice about how to deal with it. Give them enough time off in these times. And make it okay to be, to not be always on. To be almost like a coach manager, if you will, is what I would say. So that's sort of on that front. But then also become very disciplined about tracking things. Like in theory, we should be doing this anyway, right? So when you have meetings and there are commitments, write them down into a tool that everybody can use. Again, Asana is great for it, but a Google Sheet can work just as well. So that the expectations are set a little bit more clearer, and then basically it's very easy to see if things have been done or have not been done, and therefore you can check in on things. And the key thing is do it as a joint exercise rather than you assigning things to people, because that will feel very micromanageable. You need to stay away as much as you can from people feeling like you're a micromanager.
Okay.
But there are interesting ways we can do that. If you want to hear more about it, you just ping me. My email is patrick@mindmade.com.
Hey, Patrick, there's another good one from Sam Parker here. It says, we are creating virtual community events like happy hours and group gaming, but attendance is spotty. Is it appropriate to enforce mandatory fun that requires everybody to show up?
I find that a challenging one. For example, Sam, what I would rather do is make the reason of the meeting such that it is easier for you to actually give mandatory attendance requests. For example, one thing that I wanted to mention here at the end anyway for everybody that's here is we're doing this to help people right now, and we're doing it for free. If you are part of a company and you think that a content like this or any of the other programs we've now built out for working from home would be interesting to you, that would be happy to talk to you about how we could get this going. So if there's interest, email me at patrick@mindmaven.com. However, Sam, so for example, here you could, let's say you have a half an hour session. You bring a speaker in who talks about it for 20 minutes, like somebody like me about whatever, like this. And then afterwards, you have 10 minutes of fun. Now everybody is there. And then those that don't show up realize this is actually important to them. Because a lot of people aren't showing up because they think this is lame, or they're introverts, they hate the whole video thing and yada, yada, yada. But, you just got to trick them a little bit more into realizing that we need to do this because, we need to have community. We need to have a sense of community. We have to stay connected for all those reasons I mentioned earlier. Sam, are you still here? If so, did I answer your question? If so, quick answer on the chat would be super helpful. All right. Is that it? Or do you have one more question?
That's it.
That's it. Well, that's perfectly, because we can send you all back to work right on time. Again, there's a good chance we're going to do a little bit more together, right, Ali? And,
yes.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
And see if we get more invitations out to you guys. All right, everybody, have a good day.